There have been a number of opportunities over the years where Governor Moore, before he was governor, had the opportunity to be with us in person, virtually. One great occurrence was when we were reflecting on the important book you wrote, 5 Days, about the Baltimore uprising. And we had in our Yom Kippur service a conversation with you, but also with some of the informants to the book, some of the folks who were featured in the stories that you wove together from those tumultuous times in 2015. Back in those days, in April 2015, just before hosting a Pesach Seder at the White House, and 1 week before 25-year-old Freddie Gray would be arrested just 1 hour from there and 1 mile from here, then President Obama sent a Passover message to the American Jewish community. Like the Israelites who Moses led out of slavery long ago, he said, "It is up to us to never lose faith in the better day that lies ahead. Together," Obama continued, "we can continue the hard but awesome work of Tikkun Olam and do our part to repair the world." So today I want to talk about that phrase, Tikkun Olam, and why I don't like it all that much. Or more accurately, I want to share why I think the framework of brokenness and repair is problematic when pursuing justice in a Jewish idiom. Instead, I want to suggest a different way of conceptualizing our work, one rooted deeply in Torah and that I think is more authentic to the overall project of Jewishness, perhaps humanness too. The phrasing I'm suggesting instead of Tikkun Olam is Tachlit Olam. But before we get to those specifics, we need to spend a little time unpacking the current term of art. And don't get me wrong, it makes complete sense that Barack Obama would have used the phrase Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. It has become so ubiquitous in progressive circles. For many Jews, it's completely synonymous with the value of social justice. There's even a joke that a 20-something American Jew visiting Israel for the first time leans over and asks her guide, "How do you say Tikkun Olam in Hebrew?" My friends, we are certainly a congregation that cares about social justice. We're fast approaching the conclusion of our Shnat Tzedek, our year of justice. We've learned from historian Lila Corman Berman about American Jewish urbanism and its effect on Jewish politics. We've sat at the feet of co-congregants for our Locks and Learn series to consider Tzedek through the lens of harm reduction, bioethics, interreligious work, and more. Our teens traveled to Annapolis to advocate against auto-charging minors as adults. Let's get that done maybe next year. We explored environmental justice during our Shabbaton. We welcomed Bishop Dante Hickman and best-selling author Jonathan Eig to discuss the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And just last week, we welcomed Reservoir Hill neighbors and partners to present their incredible ongoing work in our community. The question isn't should Jews care about justice. The question is whether the phrase Tikkun Olam is the most helpful way for us to express it. So let's take a brief look at the term Tikkun Olam. When does it first enter the lexicon? The expression, usually rendered in the literature Tikkun HaOlam, repair of the world, first appears in the 2nd century in the Aleinu prayer. To what should we aspire according to Aleinu? Litaken Olam b'malchut Shaddai, to repair or perhaps establish the world under the kingdom of God. Later, during the early rabbinic period, the term's main usage seemed to be what Rabbi Jill Jacobs calls the preservation of the halachic system and the social order. You may recall that in Leviticus, debts are canceled every 7th year during the Shemitah, or the sabbatical year. This utopian solution to avoiding generational poverty had one significant drawback, though. It was impractical. Instead of supporting or empowering the underclass, it actually had a cooling effect on lending, with creditors unwilling to make loans during the end of the 7-year cycle, believing quite accurately that their loans would become de facto gifts. Along comes the sage Hillel, who has a particular innovation. He establishes a loophole in the law. The Torah law only cancels personal debts, but not debts due to the court in the 7th year. So Hillel's innovation, called the prose bull, is that the creditor would make a legal declaration that he was going to collect his debt. You with me? This declaration would, in effect, transfer the note from the lender to the court, making it possible in the 7th year for creditors to still loan money to those who needed it. Why, asks the Mishnah, the 3rd century text, did Hillel implement this rule? Mipnei tikkun haolam, for the sake of repairing the world. But the version of tikkun olam most people know is based not in Jewish law, but actually in Jewish mysticism. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, lives in the 16th century Tzfat in the Galilee. Luria imagines the universe coming into being through an enormous explosion, a big bang of sorts, what he calls Shvirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. Here's the story as presented by the folklorist and English professor Howard Schwartz. At the beginning of time, God's presence filled the universe. When God decided to bring the world into being to make room for creation, he contracted himself by drawing in his breath, forming a dark mass. And then God said, "Let there be light." And 10 holy vessels came forth, each filled with primordial light. God sent forth the 10 vessels like a fleet of ships, each carrying its cargo of light. But the vessels, too fragile to contain such powerful divine light, broke open, scattering holy sparks everywhere. Had these vessels arrived intact, the world would have been perfect, but instead God created people to seek out and gather up the hidden sparks wherever we can find them. Once this task is completed, the broken vessels will be restored and the world will be repaired. What is tikkun olam? It is the mending of a broken world at the cosmic level. Human actions with theurgical consequences. And that's not a bad thing. But the Kabbalists didn't understand it as volunteerism, as social action. They understood it in a much bigger context. And as Jacobs explains, the term basically disappears from use between the 1500s and the 1950s. By the 70s and 80s, tikkun olam had become the mainstream way to describe both volunteerism and other forms of social action and advocacy, of community organizing, broadly reflecting a progressive agenda. At this point in history, writes Jacobs in her book, There Shall Be No Needy, the phrase tikkun olam is so often used by both Jews and non-Jews that it threatens to become nearly meaningless. My own concern, though, isn't about the meaninglessness of tikkun olam, it's actually about the meaning. It's that I don't think the term reflects the most helpful or authentic Jewish approach to making the world or society safer, kinder, or better. The tikkun olam paradigm means human partnership with God bestows upon us a nearly impossible task, to fashion wholeness from brokenness. We are entropy janitors, sweeping up and then trying to reconstruct the shattered pieces of a profound cosmic mess. Consider Baltimore and how the world viewed the city back in 2015, or how people see it today. I remember the morning after the worst of the rioting, we kept our kids home from school to help with the cleanup. My family and I walked west and a little south and found ourselves at Strength to Love Urban Farm near Monroe and Pressman Street, working to repair a broken hoop house and trying to salvage some of the produce after the awesome heat of a nearby burning car had melted the plastic. Baltimore was, as it were, reaping the harvest of its past sins, among them a law enforcement policy best summed up in 2 words: broken windows. The theory, widely criticized, argues for policing disorder, not necessarily solving crimes or creating just outcomes. The Tikkun Olam paradigm and broken windows theory emerge out of a similar worldview. Improvement equals repair. But there are two problems with this approach, I think. First, the repair of something broken brings it back to a previously functional state, but it does nothing to advance it. Repair is about reinstatement, not progress. But the more insidious challenge with the brokenness repair model is that while things can be broken and then fixed, things don't notice they're broken, and they don't notice when they're mended because they're things. People, on the other hand, who feel broken, or more frequently are made to feel broken, struggle to mend because brokenness and having a sense of brokenness is constitutionally debilitating. And the same is true, I think, for communities and for societies. Obsessing over broken windows is code for saying that a place is broken. And who wants to live in a broken place or a broken world? Broken windows thinking is a dangerous counteragent to horizon thinking. But what, my friends, what if there were a different model, a better model embedded in our Torah? In this week's Parsha, in the beginning of Numbers 7, just after the priestly benediction that I spoke about earlier, and at the head of a long list of initiatory gifts for the tabernacle brought by the tribal chieftains, it says this, Vayehi bayom kalot Moshe lakim et hamishkan. On the day that Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all of its furnishings, as well as the altar and the utensils. Sounds pedestrian, right? But if you know what to look for, you can't help but notice the verb kalot, to finish or complete, is the same verb that's used to describe the very creation of the world. Vayechulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzva'am, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all of their array. Vayechal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i, on the seventh day God finished the work that had been undertaken. God ceased on the seventh day from doing any work, and God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy. As our sages understand it, the tabernacle is a miniature world, its components and the construction of it mirroring the universe itself. Genesis says God completes the work of creation, but we know that this is only part of the story. Torah understands creation as a process. Humans enter the story in order to serve as partners with God, however we understand God. Furthering the creative enterprise, the cosmos is incomplete. It's unrealized. The world isn't broken. It's developing, it's evolving, it's expanding. The Genesis model is all about the horizon. God begins to create the world in 6 days and then rests. But before that Shabbat, God creates in the divine image a species called humanity and places us into the world, le'ovda u'leshomra, to till it and tend it. We aren't entropy janitors. We're existential horticulturalists. The Hasidic master, Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, explains the universe God made is always in an unfinished state. It is not like a vessel. It requires continuous work, for the world is recreated every day and humanity is reborn every morning. In other words, God doesn't complete the world. That was just phase one. We, in partnership with the divine, are responsible for the rest. Chevra, brokenness is stultifying for those who live it, but a powerful yet fleeting motivation for those who seek to repair. Fixing things can be seductive, but how quickly we lose interest and move on to the next project, the next crisis. By contrast, a world of potentiality, a nation worthy of cultivation, a city of promise, these are worth fighting for. So if not tikkun olam, what phrase should we use to describe our work? Well, the word tzedek is good, the Hebrew word meaning justice. That's why here at Beth Am, we reorganized our social justice initiatives of service, of advocacy, of relational work under the umbrella of Tzedek Beth Am, pursuing justice together. But another way of capturing the potential energy of the work is with the word Tachlit. Tachlit comes from the same root as that verb from Genesis and from our Torah portion. It means completion. In Adon Olam, the hymn at the end of the service, God is described as Bli Reshit, without beginning, Bli Tachlit, without end, or without limit. God is limitless. The project of creation, however, is not, at least not eventually. Tachlit Olam, completing the world, implies an ongoing process of improvement. The added benefit of using Tachlit Olam instead of Tikkun Olam is that Tachlit can also mean purpose. So what is it to work for the completion of the world? It's to fulfill God's intended purpose for humanity, to participate in the ongoing betterment of our planet and all of its inhabitants. So one final image from the creation narrative. There's a midrash, that's an interpretive rabbinic text that I love, which tries to explain why it is that in chapter 1 of Genesis, we're told that the earth brought forth grass. But in chapter 2, just before the Torah describes the creation of human beings, it says, no shrub of the field was yet on earth. Wait a minute, was there grass or was there not? How to resolve this seeming contradiction? Rav Asi explains, Melamed sheyatzu deshaim va'amdu al petach karka, ad sheba adam arishon uvikesh aleim rachamim. This teaches that the grass emerged on the third day, but stood petach karka, just below the surface, and did not grow until human beings came and prayed for mercy upon them, and rain came, and then the grasses sprouted. Picture that for a moment. Grass sitting, waiting just below the surface for the right conditions to burst forth. My friends, the world isn't broken. Systems can be broken. Sometimes they can be repaired. Sometimes they must be reimagined or even dismantled and reconstructed. But the people within those systems, our families, our communities, we are not broken, just unrealized, in need of attention, love, investment, nourishment. Tachlit Olam, this is our opportunity to finish, or to at least help finish what God started. Justice you shall pursue, it says in Deuteronomy. Justice isn't to be found amidst so many broken pieces of shattered lives. It is ahead of us, stretching out before us. God unfurls the heavens like a curtain. Hanoteh chadok shamayim, says the prophet Isaiah. Justice is the work of our minds and of our hands and the achievement of our greatest purpose. It is waiting just beyond the horizon. All we have to do is go get it. Shabbat shalom.